So let us dive straight in, because we have a lot of ground to cover. And Friedrich-Wilhelm, if I could come to you first as an air navigation service provider. In terms of, we've heard a lot about the achievements of SESAR. Please don't list them all, but if there was something you would particularly highlight that is really having an impact, or you think will have an impact on your organization, maybe you can give us an example.
Yeah, thank you. I think, first of all, and that was not mentioned, I consider it to be a big success that during COVID, this community is still alive, because it's us who will change the digital European sky. And it's on us to be successful. If we are not successful, nobody will. And therefore, that's one major element. Most of the others have been mentioned. I think virtualization is a major topic. Everything around 4D trajectory is the holy grail of the future, if you would ask me. And one tiny thing not mentioned, but being part of my heart, is ground-based augmentation, which means GBus, which is certified in category 2 already. We had a first flight from Lufthansa into Frankfurt doing that. And that is improving the way to start and approach in airports with huge potential in many ways, environmental friendly. And what I like from the heart of a CTO is maintenance, for example, is much cheaper, much easier and much more reliable, and therefore that's a technology not mentioned today, but as well to be mentioned in the same row of virtualization, 4D trajectory, and GBus.
Thank you, and great to hear a very concrete example of how it's being used and the impact it could have in the future. Hendrik-Jan, if I could come to you, and Skadrone, I believe, a provider of software-based services for drone management. So we've talked a lot about the integration of new entrants already, and I'm sure we'll come back to it many times today. What would you highlight in particular, and can you give us an example of where SESAR is, those projects are or will make a difference?
Let me maybe highlight two achievements. First, general one, I think SGU has proven to be the driver, the key driver of technological innovation in the entire European aviation sector. SGU has given shape to a working and coherent innovation pipeline where real and tangible benefits in the form of SESAR solutions and the impact they have are key. And so, to give you a very concrete achievement, and then I'm talking from my perspective, my focus domain being unmanned aviation is definitely, first of all, the publication of Europe's blueprint for U-space, so Europe's vision on how to manage those new entrants, new airspace users, basically the UAS traffic management system. And then definitely at the end of the SESAR 2020 program, the publication of the first concept of operations for U-space. A great success, because that has been the basis for that legislative framework that we have now, and it's guiding us towards a future, towards a digital sky, towards the integration of manned and unmanned aviation.
Thank you very much. We'll come back on that issue of the enabling environment for what you are doing and in our next session when we hear from some of those with the policy and regulatory responsibilities in these areas. Let me turn to Hermann Mattanovich. Hermann, Frequentis, you're supplying communication and information systems for controlled centres. What would you highlight as a particular achievement of SESAR? And can you give us a very concrete example of how it is or could make a difference?
I think the big difference with SESAR is that SESAR enabled all the stakeholders, or maybe you even could say it pushed or forced all the stakeholders to work together to a solution. I think we have heard it several times. We have a fragmented airspace in Europe, and we want a single European sky. What does it mean? It means standardization, and it means interoperability. How can it come that for decades we deliver individual solutions for each individual ANSP and not a product for Europe? Yes, it is because the stakeholders do not plan it together. And I think SESAR made a difference there. We have seen it in the remote tower, we have seen it in virtual center, we have seen it in use-based integration, and this is because of the setup and the financial setup with SESAR, and I think that will make the difference for Europe.
Thank you. So echoing there, Raul Medina said this is the place, SESAR is the place where the magic happens. I like your interpretation of that. That forcing you, have no choice but to work together, as we have heard, as the industry declaration we will hear about later on also makes clear. Let's get an air traffic controller's perspective in terms of the achievements, Marc, and also if you could give me a very concrete example of how it's changing your work.
Well, first of all, let me start with SESAR SJU would have to be invented if it didn't exist. Okay? So when in 2008 we started with the first admin board meeting, we never imagined where we are today. Okay? And that is a success. Now when we look at the ideas of the founding fathers, what have they achieved? They have brought together everybody, which is good. So the research has been focusing on what we deliver. We talk about air traffic management, and we have to say that a lot has been deployed and is being used, but not necessarily in air traffic control. That is also where when we talk about the different success levels, you might have the airports, the network, which have adopted solutions from SESAR quite rapidly in a successful way. We have also some applications at the air traffic control level when it comes to airport operation, terminal airspace, where you have TBS, you have wake vortex solution. All these things have been deployed. In a center like mine, mind you, I'm maybe a bit a lucky guy. We have a lot of advanced tools. We haven't seen that much of the SESAR solutions being deployed. And here, that leads me to the second point. So aviation as a total has certainly benefited from SESAR, ATM as well. But when it comes to air traffic control, we have an issue with deployment. And there, the issue with deployment, we have poured into the system believing to do the right things. We have put in 3 billion of euros to the deployment. And because it has become a political process where maybe the actors like the European Commission has started to become a technical expert instead of a policy maker, we have started to slow down the process, slow down the deployment.
Okay, I want to come back on the challenges in a moment and what we need to do to accelerate that deployment. But thank you very much for now, and it's great to begin to already set that challenge. But let's complete the picture. Marc mentioned there airports in all of this, Philippe. From your perspective, again, what would you highlight about SESAR and how is it changing the way you work?
Journeys begin and end at airports. And I would say what has changed in one sentence, we have changed from being enablers of operation, enabling operations, to being in control of ground operations. Thanks to SESAR, thanks to the data exchange, thanks to the work on total airport management, on AOP, NOP, airport operations plans, and coordination with network operations plans, we have raised a step higher, and now we can control operations. There has been a brief image in the film of our epoch of our control center in Orly, where we run all types of situations, even things you would not imagine are possible, but on the ground, unimaginable things happen. And this is what SESAR has brought us. The data exchange, the integration between partners, the enabling technologies have been there. We have now a number of them in place, and we're happy with this. Of course, I will, in my second intervention, speak of what's coming for the future, because we're in a different world now.
Absolutely, and I'd like to come back to that in a little while. But that is, Philippe, stay with you for just a moment here. that underlines for us how important this is for airports, for all of you. You've all underlined and given examples of the difference it is making. In terms of where we are on the journey to a truly digital European sky, how would you assess, Philippe, how far along that road we are?
We have gone very far down the road on the search of performance. We have now a very high number of enablers for performance which are available. We have begun to integrate them. We have only begun. I'm sorry because you're pushing me to begin on what I would have said on my second intervention, but a number of the keynotes have said we need to raise the bar. And now we are going also to place the bar elsewhere. We have been for years in the pursuit of performance to do our job properly, which is basically the essence of anyone who wants to work well. Now we are going to performance for the planet.
So not only raise it, but move it. We'll come back on what implications that has in a little while. Marc, in terms of that journey towards it, again, how for you, where are we on that journey now?
I think what we need to pay particular attention to, and I would like to rebound on what I said before, is that with the EU funds for deployment, we foster defragmentation. Be it digitalized infrastructure where everybody can actually have a digital layer and download some of the applications, but we should not continue to augment the fragmentation through EU funds. And that is really, for me, the biggest challenge, because the research is done, the ideas are clever, some of the solutions are really great. Now, the problem is if the various different partners, when they have to deploy it, they have to have a common, agreed and shared vision. And I think maybe the green agenda, maybe the CO2 environment-friendly approach might be the federating element. But here really we're, as a community, we are all challenged that we don't continue in fragmenting through available funds solutions which will oppose actually what we want to achieve.
Which links to what we'll talk about this afternoon and the launch of the campaign on the master plan, because first point is to define that vision, that ambition, and then the roadmap to deliver. Come back on that in a little bit of a little while. But Hermann, from your perspective, if you were giving the EU, Europe, a report card on its progress towards a digital European sky, how many marks out of 10 would you give us?
Yeah, it's 80% done, but the next 20% are the hard ones, because we did all the fun part, the research, the trials, the success there, and now it's to the deployment. And the deployment is the real hard work where organizations have to change as well. Because if you want to deploy something interoperable, something which is the same all over Europe, there will be changes to organizations, and that's not the fun part, that's the hard part. But it has to happen, otherwise the 80% that have been done in the past were for nothing, because only if they are deployed, they have a value.
And when you talk about changes to organizations, what are you pointing to? A mindset change? What sort of issues do we need to address?
It's mindset, it's concept of operations on one hand, but it's mindset as well. It's the way how tenders are written, it's the way how offers are done, it's the way how the users and the vendors work together, and of course it's the way how we handle working together within the competition between the vendors as well.
Come back on some of these barriers and how we address them. But I want to complete the picture of our scorecard, as it were, Hendrik-Jan. He says 80% done, now the hard bit, the 20% that's left. Would that be your assessment?
I'm afraid I'm a little bit more pessimistic here, but I see the good things being with that new ecosystem, we could act as challengers of the incumbent ATM ecosystem and its stakeholders. We could try to speed up the digitalization process, and that's, I think, what we could achieve with U-Space. U-Space as a concept has not been conceived or developed just to enable safe and efficient UAS operations or introduce new concepts such as urban air mobility. I do believe that we will be paving the way to the digital transformation of ATM and even the entire aviation sector. Because what we are doing here as a U-Space service provider to be together with our technology partners is basically we are building and we are going to implement a digital airspace and air traffic management system. And I think once that has been proven safe enough, and safety will be key here, I think, those concepts and the underlying systems might be or will be transposed to ATM. We will most certainly influence or impact the digital transformation roadmap of ATM. Another good thing of U-Space, of that new legislative framework, is I think the fact that it will create a new and open competitive market for the provision of air traffic services to those new entrants, being unmanned aircraft operators. I dare to say then, and that's maybe a blunt statement, that we might achieve with this new market what we failed to deliver maybe with the single European Sky program. The fact that one airspace or one airspace concept, call it U-Space airspace, rather than a fragmented airspace throughout Europe, could be simultaneously managed by multiple service providers rather than one service provider per member state. And this by focusing on the real needs of airspace users, their aspirations to enable operations in the most safe and efficient manners in order to conduct business in that very low level airspace. So yes, there is maybe not that high of a score, but I see the good things and I see a positive evolution, and I see us, the new ecosystem, as challengers, as advisories of the incumbent ecosystem.
And Friedrich-Wilhelm, are you glass half full or glass half empty on this?
Yeah, good question. But I did like the polite answer from Hermann, the 80-20 concept, because it's really the way, and I agree, that we did do lots of evaluations on algorithms, procedures, and we have plenty of smart solutions in our books. They only need to be implemented now. And with regard to implementation, and those are the 20%, the difficult 20%, we really need to change our technological legacy. And that's one of the major keys in order to get us moving. And
can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, for example, we think, I mean, I could talk about that for hours, so please stop me. Yeah? Today we think in systems, and if we invent something new, that ends up in a new screen in front of a controller. And now the controller has to translate the data he sees on the new screen into actions on other screens. And that's not how you improve processes today or in the past decade. That's something we simply do wrong, and we need to invest in technology that allows us to change the processes which will be operated by the users, can be changed quickly. And today's infrastructure does not allow that. So we need, if I can add one sentence, we need cloud technology, we need a service-oriented infrastructure, and we need a decoupled HMI. Those are the three main pillars.
So when we talk about the barriers to deployment, what is stopping even more uptake, we did hear 100 of those solutions, I think Andreas said at the beginning, already making a difference, already having an impact. But a sense, I think, of frustration, I feel, that really, and this is why the focus in SESAR 3 on implementation. When we look at the challenge ahead for you, that infrastructure, we don't have the infrastructure we need. That would that be?
Well, I wouldn't say we don't have the infrastructure we need, but the infrastructure we have does not support us in quick changes. And we need to do quick changes in our processes and technologies in order to make use of all the very good ideas we came up from SESAR.
A question to all of you, really, in terms of that deployment, the 20% that's difficult, as Hermann, I don't know whether you were being polite, but if you had to identify the key barriers, the key issues that we need to address so that you, the end users of these solutions, can really take full advantage of them, what would be the key issues that we need to address? We've touched on some of them. I want to come back also to Philippe on this question of what moving the bar means, but what would you identify as the key challenges to you really taking up these solutions and using them fully? Marc, you pointed a little bit to that a little bit earlier on. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you see as the challenge?
The problem is that we are still working in most of the air traffic control units in Europe with legacy system, meaning not unbolted on a physical site. And that is what just has been mentioned. You need to put above this a digital layer. You need to use the new technologies to transform the data into usable algorithms. And then you can deploy ATM or air traffic control as a service. And that is the biggest challenge, and therefore I'm coming back. I don't want to be too much insisting, because I think this is our deployment manager is trying to do really a great job, but it is a difficult job. But with the amount of money put into the deployment, we could have bought off all the infrastructure in Europe, the current available air traffic control infrastructure, and have then put above that the layer, the needed digital layer, which you then can start to work with. And that, for me, would be the biggest challenge to address, the current challenge to be addressed, because otherwise we just continue to improve the current existing system, which are nut and bolt in the different units, and that will force the fragmentation. Because what does it mean? It means I learn to work on this tool, my colleague learns to work on this tool, and every time we need a translator of the data that the system can talk to each other. If you have a cloud or a digital layer, the data is same, and you just download it as a virtual application.
So how do we do that? I mean, how do we go from building on what we have, which is the logical, obvious way people normally proceed? How do you make that leap? And then I'll come to you, Hermann, but how do we make that leap, Marc?
Yes,
yes, because you raised that point.
You should ask here. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a researcher. I'm an air traffic controller. So I am just asking for all those bright brains who are working as SJU and in the SDM, please come up with some sort of commonly agreed way to go. And if that's the master plan, the better. If you need the CO2, the environmental challenges as motivated, the better. But stop trying to build up in silos to something which is trying to reach the overarching layer. But again, I'm not the expert in this domain.
Yes, of course, please do jump in.
One sentence maybe on the question on how do we do that. There are two projects out there which you can learn about, which are right in front of the door and the coffee machine. It's Vitesea and iSnap, and those projects are working on solutions for exactly those questions, and they are part of the SESAR projects.
Thank you very much.
There are maybe more, but I know those two.
Thank you very much. We're going to hear more about those projects in the exhibition a bit later, but thank you. And please do, I think it's very important to ground our conversation all the time in those very concrete examples of what we are doing and where the challenges are. Hermann, you touched on those challenges earlier. You talked about changes to organizations being absolutely key. What for you, when you look at the take-up of these solutions, what for you is the key barrier that we need to address?
One of the key barriers is the way how we deliver systems, how the proposals are done, how the systems are defined, because you said it's always defined as a system and not as a service on a platform. If you start defining a system, you ask vendors to offer different solutions for this specific system. Everybody will come up with his own USPs. unique selling points. In the end, then the ANSP will select the nicest USBs from all the different vendors. He will then get offers for systems that are not there today because no one has all the USBs from everybody. And it will end up in a new development program for a new system, which is unique again. So we have to move away from this uniqueness to something which is interoperable and standardized. I think that's the only way to change the technical background. Technology is not the problem. The technology is there. The processes have to change that the technology will be used in the right way.
Going to come back on that issue of standardization in our next panel, but Hendrik-Jan, from your perspective, and you talked about that speeding up of digitalization, and you can be the front runners in doing that. What, from your perspective as a new entrant, is the key to that acceleration?
Key to that acceleration, I think what we're trying to do here is marrying two different worlds, maybe. I mean, an existing ecosystem with a proven track record when it comes to safety, well-established working methods. But when it comes to automation levels, a system or an ecosystem that is slowly progressing from maybe level 1 to 2, with some exceptions maybe in the coming years based on some SESAR solutions. And then there is the new world, the new ecosystem which has to start with already a relatively high automation level. I mean, we are starting at automation level 2 and will be progressing at a high speed to higher automation levels in the coming years. So the question is, when we want to go to and establish that single, that integrated, that digital sky, that will only happen if we are able to let both systems speak to each other in the most safe, secure and efficient way. So building safe and secure interfaces between both systems, I think will be key and will most probably be the first challenge in the coming years. Interfaces that will allow us to exchange, to timely exchange the operational data between actors in the ATM ecosystem and actors in the UTM ecosystem. And at the same time, the challenge will be to avoid implementing maybe new bottlenecks into that whole data exchange system. For instance, in Belgium, we will implement use space based on decentralized vision on common information services. What we do want to avoid, of course, is that by choosing for that centralized vision or implementation, that we will introduce new bottlenecks, new single points of failures. So it's all about, for me, safe and secure operational data exchanges and making sure that we are able to take that first step in terms of let both systems communicate in the most safe and secure ways with each other.
Thank you. Philippe, from your perspective, from an airport perspective, and then I want to come out to all of you for any questions or comments. The key barriers to the market take-up from an airport perspective that we need to address.
The key barrier and our key problem is that we are now on the dark side of the force. Maybe not many of you have, but I have been with a light blue jacket on a Sunday, cold Sunday, winter Sunday morning, facing angry residents and explaining them that they needed a new terminal at the airport. I did not win. The project was scrapped. And we are not the aviation that our fathers knew, that was something that was taken per se and that was accepted and that was even taken as a leader of new civilization. We are on the wrong side. We can turn back on the right side. We can overcome this barrier. We can be leaders of going into the new world. For this, I have two keywords. The first keyword is deliver. We need to deliver. The second keyword is share. Deliver. Deliver what? As you said, we have a 2050 target for decarbonizing aviation. This is too vague and too far. We can, and that's a challenge for each and every one of us here. We can deliver milestones faster than that. And we can be understood and be felt as serious people by setting those milestones and meeting them. Serious people. We're an industry, we can show we're serious, we can deliver. One of these reachable targets, for instance, is ground taxiing, decarbonized ground taxiing. We have a number of enabling technologies. We have a complexity of running operations with new vehicles, but that can be modeled, that can be negotiated and prepared with ATC. We can do it. Let's do it. Let's set a target and meet it, and we'll have sharp reductions in ground emissions before we have sharp reductions in air emissions. That was only an example. So deliver milestones, set targets, deliver them. The second is share. You have a tremendous potential of R&D and enabling technologies. Why keep them to ourselves? Why shouldn't they be used for the decarbonation of our world as a whole? We can, technology can flow from air, aviation to car industry, whatever. We can do this. One example, we have a problem of data sharing. We have also tremendous potential for solutions in data sharing. We at airport feel that this can be useful. We airports are becoming managers of flows of energy. We provide energy to all types of vehicles, ground vehicles, electricity, aircraft, tow bars. We are going to manage flows of energy. We'll need data to do this. This is something this industry is going to develop. It can share them with others. There is a panel in the exhibition of information sharing between rail and aviation. We can teach them a lot on this. Let's do it. And then we can be at the forefront of the new world.
Thank you very much indeed. If we could have the lights up so I can see if there are any questions or comments from our audience. I want to come back on your moving the bar. You've begun to outline how we need to move it. I'd like to get some reactions to that. But does anybody have a question for our panel or a brief comment to make at this stage? Or are you happy for me to go on grilling them? I think yes, hang on a minute. And could I ask you please to introduce yourself and please be brief. Thank you very much, sir.
Good morning. I'm Arthur Dallow, founder of Inspiration. I have a question for the gentleman. We're speaking about ATM mostly, but when you look at the future, especially looking at U-space, how do you look at the vertical integration of spatial layers? So from space, airspace, lower airspace to urban planning and development, because we need all those layers in a general governance to manage this whole in the future. So how do you look at that?
Thank you very much. Any more while I'm out here? I don't see a hand raised, so let's come back. It's quite a specific question. Can one of you pick up on that? Can anyone help us with that? Please, Hendrik-Jan.
It's true that our current focus is, of course, in a very low-level airspace. So we will be implemented, at least as the spirit behind the U-space regulation, the concept of U-space in a very low-level airspace between ground level and 500 feet AGL. Next will, of course, be to extend that. First, I think we will need to lay down the building blocks that we will need, so the fundamentals of that new digital traffic management system. We will need to prove as well that all of that can be done or will allow us to provide services in the most safe and efficient ways. And next will be to indeed have follow-on discussions, and there are quite some projects going on, extending that concept of U-space to, for instance, an urban air mobility context, and also think of raising the bar in terms of altitudes. But that's maybe a question more to be asked to ATM actors on how they see integration at higher altitudes at term.
Marc, do you want to add anything there?
Well, maybe I'm going to say a few stupid things, but I will try. For me, whatever flies in my airspace, it doesn't matter if it's small, big, I need just to know what is the performance envelope, okay? So can I trust that if I send a WhatsApp message via CPDLC to the pilot that he responds within 30 seconds? Can I trust that if I use my voice, even with speech recognition, that the answer is coming in a timely phase? Is there somewhere an automat telling me the same thing? So a drone which is completely automated, who can interact with me? Then I don't really care. But for the time being, these performance levels have not been adjusted to the new technologies, or put it the other way around, for the time being, I don't trust the performance of a tool which flies around in an automated way to respond in a timely manner and in the same way I would expect it. Once we have solved that, well, then it's just a flying object like another one.
So that is one of the keys. I think it's called altimetry, if I'm not mistaken, this whole vertical integration issue. To come back to any others before I come back to our panel? Okay, I want to really look to the future now. And Philippe, you talked about that moving of the bar. And you said it's moving to performance for the planet, is the way you put it. And I wanted to just ask you, in terms as we look to the master plan, Andreas has already made an appeal for ambition, to raise the bar, as he put it, and as Raul Medina also put it in his video address. Are we being ambitious enough? Where do we need to set our sights as we look towards the Master Plan 2024?
There is a tremendous potential in the technologies you have developed over the past years, and we have the might and the possibility to do it. We have the potential. We do need to set our sights right in the right direction. And I would suggest that this should be in the terms of setting milestones, and milestones that are significant to the public. That is something that's going to happen in the next 1, 2, 5 years, rather than in 20 years, and meeting them to be a credible industry. On the ground, we can do this on decarbonizing of ground operations. We would very much like that the ATM guys improve the way out of and into the airport, so as to make less much noise over the head of people. We would very much like that aircraft operators extend the gear later in the approach and use less much thrust. There is a number of outcomes of past research that can come into play soon, and that we would certainly help us in improving. And all this is going straight to practical results. This may need that some successful research should be pushed forward. Other less successful research could be pruned out. Be perhaps more selective in what's being done, but the potential is there. We have a tremendous mass of know-how and knowledge that's going to come into play in the next years.
And Hermann, Magda said in her opening keynote that there were very high expectations of this sector to deliver on decarbonisation, on some of the airspace capacity issues we've been discussing. She said the list of challenges ahead, and I quote, is not short, which is a nice way round to put it. For you, and as we look ahead to the master plan, and we'll focus on this afternoon, but what for you is the key to accelerating progress now? What do we need? A change of vision? Or is it more of the same? I think she said earlier, we're not trying to, sorry, you don't use wheels so much, well, you do with an aircraft, but I was going to say reinvent the wheel, and then think I'm mixing my metaphors here. But what for you are the key issues we need to focus on as we look to the new master plan?
If we talk about speeding up the deployment, then we heard it already, that the major problem there is the legacy systems that are out today. And it's not that easy to change that. So we have to tackle this. And I think most important will be to do this in a way that we get a harmonized environment in the next step, and not an individual new platform for each and every fragmented part of the European airspace ATM systems. So this is something which has to be taken into account from the technical point of view, that we create an environment there that will enable the deployment of all the nice things that have been built during the last years in an efficient, really efficient and resource efficient, money-wise, time-wise efficient way, so that we can achieve the positive results as soon as possible.
And just to the question of, are we being ambitious enough? Magda underlined this is an update. It's not starting again. But do you believe, how ambitious do we need to be in the new plan? How far do we need to raise that bar?
We have to be more ambitious, I'm quite sure, otherwise it will take too long.
Time is of the essence. Friedrich-Wilhelm, from your perspective, are we being ambitious enough? How far do we have to raise the bar?
I think in terms of goals like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% of savings in terms of CO2 and whatever, we are ambitious enough. What we should be more ambitious is in implementing solutions. And we already did talk about some obstacles in our way. With regard of successful implementations, it's virtualization, and maybe 2 more elements to mention. It's homework. Yeah? It's not fancy new algorithms. It's homework we need to do with virtualization. We as well need a better data connection between air and ground. The data connections we have today will not help us in the future. If we don't have better data connections, everything won't work. So that's another element to focus on. And by the way, my personal favorite topic would be to get rid of an analog voice communication standard, which is 100 years old and kind of stupid in this business, but it's still there. And I don't think anybody has very good ideas how we can get rid of that in 3 years. So that's something we need to work on, the connection between air and ground, beside virtualization. And on top of that, if we are concentrating on virtualization, we are talking about topics like cloud technology. Yeah? And with regard to cloud technology, a topic I already mentioned, we come to the headline of supportive regulation. If we do only interpolate regulation from the past in the future for cloud technology, it won't work. We need to come up with new ideas in regulation to allow us to make use of those proven technologies. I'm not talking about the hottest new technology. I'm talking about technologies companies and businesses already use for 10 years. And if we could get a step forward in terms of regulation, which is maybe not in the core of what SESAR does, but where SESAR needs to give some hints and headlines and supports for the direction to move, then we will be able to implement good solutions, very intelligent solutions, which are already on the table or will be on the table in the next couple of years, much more quickly and in this decade and not in generations.
Indeed, and we're going to hear later on when we hear about the exhibition and some of the projects there, projects precisely focusing on these issues like virtualization. So more to come on that later. But Hendrik-Jan, I wanted to ask you the same a question. If you share Philippe's analysis that we need not just to raise the bar but to move it, do you think we are being ambitious enough now? And what do you think the implications are of all of this for the master plan?
I do think we are ambitious enough. I think the challenge now lies in the effective deployment of many SESAR solutions. Again, my perspective of unmanned aviation, in the past we have had in SESAR 2020 and even now in SESAR 3, we have had quite a significant number of R&D and demonstration activities related to UAS operations, use space, unmanned or urban air mobility. I think the focus now should maybe more lie on a common and European-wide approach towards implementation of all those new concepts, use space, urban air mobility, allowing, and that should enable those new actors, drone service providers, use space service providers, to start offering their services in a European market rather than in their national market. And I fear, and as an early adopter, we are challenged, or we are having the challenge of interpretation of this new legislative framework. I mean, we have observed that this initial framework, and it's a very good thing that we are already there, but that initial framework contains quite some gaps and even some inconsistencies. And all of that, for early adapters, now that might lead to different interpretations and different implementations. So what we do really want to avoid is to end up with 20x different dialects of use space or urban air mobility, because that's not how we are going to create a single European market. So maybe, yes, we need to be ambitious, I mean, we might need to speed up, but let's not hurry too much neither, because that might come at the detriment of creating a flourishing drone services market, a flourishing and competitive use space services market. So what we need here at this stage, at this moment in time, is an orchestrator, both EASA and even as you stepping up and trying to orchestrate, get feedback from all those early implementations and make sure that that feedback is reflected ASAP in updates of regulations and standards.
Thank you very much. We are almost out of time, but before we end, I wanted to come back. We have heard, and you've all given concrete examples of SESAR solutions that are already making a difference, and we've talked a lot about the challenges ahead, particularly in relation to deployment and that uptake. But I wanted to come back to something Philippe said in his first response when he talked about 2050 and that target of climate neutrality and said it's too vague and it's too far. We need milestones. I'd like to set you a very short milestone. If you had to identify a key next step, of all the issues you've raised, of all the barriers we've discussed, for each of you, and coming back to the title of our event, which I should be able to say off heart by now, but still have to read, to make Europe the most efficient and environmentally friendly sky to fly in the world. For each of you, the key next step of all the issues you've raised today. I'm going to start with Philippe and just come down the line. Philippe.
Too bad I'm the first. I'd like to have remote apron control to help on airports. I'd like to have green taxiing, and well, that will be all for me. I've already suggested two of them.
Marc.
Go green. So, with the research carried out in the SJU, with the research ongoing in IPCC, use the revision of the ATM Master Plan, the tools we have in place, to look from a network perspective what we have to do to avoid reputational damage, because otherwise we end up like the tobacco industry. Means what? We have a network, we have key players, we have regulators, we have standardization bodies, everybody is there, but now we have to apply it in an intelligent way. Long-haul traffic is CO2. So start with there. It's a small step, but it's already a small step. And then we come lower down, and then we can make the gate to gate. So that will be my only wish. Go green, be ambitious, but do it in a clever way, in a research way. And hire air traffic controllers.
Thank you very much indeed. Hermann.
A concrete next step. Build everything for the optimized trajectory with the free route and the best trajectory for CO2 and fuel consumption. I think this is possible to do that. It will create a lot of push because it needs a lot of different things to be done, and you can calculate easily what it brings.
Thank you. I know you want to jump in, Philippe. Quick one, if you would, because we're almost out of time.
I have my big idea. My big idea is small steps. We are going to go far away. We're going to go up to 2050. Let's pave the way with 4 small steps and show the public that we're fulfilling each and every one of those small steps.
Thank you very much. A big or a small step? Hendrik-Jan, what is your key priority?
Fully interoperable traffic management system, so ATM and UTM as key building block, as enabler for a fully digital sky, but also traffic management systems that are able to integrate, to interface with other traffic management systems. I mean, the ambition should be to create a multimodal transport system, an efficient and safe multimodal transport system. So it's not about only air or ATM solutions, it's about interoperability as well with other transportation modes.
Indeed, so that work that SESAR is now doing, for example, with the rail sector, absolutely crucial. You have the last word, Friedrich.
Thank you. It's been Magda Kopczynska who said, and I wrote that down, find practical solutions for real-life challenges. We invented plenty of wheels in the SESAR project, and now we need to build roads, yeah, to use those wheels. And that will help us, and we did talk about plenty of items in order to build roads, that will help us to optimize processes based on 4D trajectories in the next decade. That will be key. And if we are not successful to hire plenty of controllers, that will help us to automate processes and get along with the number of controllers we already have.